Hey, we are live here. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm joined by two of my friends here, Matt Ruddick and Jay Smith.
How's it going, guys?
Hello.
So today, the topic at hand is flight simulators. You know, virtual flying, real fun is the title. It's what we're going to talk about today. Should be some good conversation points. And to that end, if you guys have questions about flight simulators, feel free to post them. We're going to be monitoring those as they come through this live feed, hoping to answer some of them. We'll give you a shout out if you say hello, that sort of thing. This is really an off-the-cuff opportunity for us to sit down and talk about some of the flight simulators that we're using, enjoying at home while we can't make it out to the flying field as easily. So once again, if you're just now joining us, we're excited to have you here. Technical communications lead, Matt Ruddick, excited to have you on, man. You've got so much of a depth of knowledge when it comes to especially some of the FPV stuff and some of those different simulators that are out there. Jay Smith, executive editor, as always, it's happy to have you around, man. As far as RealFlight goes, and even let's jump in the Wayback Machine. We'll talk about Phoenix and things like that. Like, you are the go-to. Like, you've got some of that knowledge, and I'm really excited to hear from you about RealFlight 9, their most recent version, and kind of how they're working, how the online virtual community is kind of embracing some of these things right now, especially, and even some of the events that are happening that are kind of, we've done a little bit with the AMA. I've hosted a couple of live streams just as an opportunity to get together and have fun. So yeah, let's open this thing up. Matt, we were talking earlier about Aerofly, and I had never honestly heard of Aerofly. You said, "Hey, wait a minute, check this out." You opened it up, shared your screen with me, and I was back at AMA. So tell me a little bit about Aerofly and what that's all about.
Yeah, so I'll give you a quick little backstory just to set this up for everybody. So back when I started flying, which, I mean, compared to a lot of folks, wasn't all that long ago, just about 5 years ago or so. The first thing I thought was, okay, well, I need to get a simulator. That's the first thing I need to do. Well, I'm going to go get RealFlight. That's the logical thing to do. Well, I don't actually have a PC. I have a Mac, and RealFlight doesn't run on the Mac. So I was left with only just a couple of options at that point. I could either, run a dual boot system so I could actually have Windows, or go buy a Windows PC, or I could find a different simulator that does run on the Mac. And the first one that I came across ended up being my favorite, which was called Aerofly, and it's by a company called Icarus. That's IKARUS. Icarus.net is where their website lives. But it's a really cool piece of software. So it's really high graphically, has really nice graphics. But what really drew me in at that time, it was one of the few places you could go where it has real life flying sites that have been kind of built into the system, but using photographs. So it looks hyper realistic. And the thing that stuck out to me was it had not just one, not two, but three different AMA International Air Modeling Center flying sites. It has Site 1, which is the L pad. Right there you see is Site 4. There's Site 3. So if you are familiar at all with the International Air Modeling Center, you've got these locations right there where you can fly from, and it's so cool. I have a blast flying at these places. You've got Torrey Pines is in there, which I think we had a picture of a few minutes ago. We have Triple Tree is also there. So folks that are going to, kind of missing out on Joe Knoll, that's a good place you can go. But it's a great simulator. They've got tons of different models that are built in. Excuse me, I'm pulling up the features list right now. So there's actually two versions that are out. There's Aerofly 7 and Aerofly 8. Now, I'm using Aerofly 7. I've not yet upgraded to 8 yet. I probably will soon, to be perfectly honest. You can find it in the Mac App Store. From the basic model of Aerofly 7, there's 30 different airplane models, airplanes, helicopters, drones, etc., to choose from. But what's cool is they have in-app purchases where you can actually buy more planes to go in there and fly. Now that runs about $40, so it's not terribly expensive in my opinion, especially when you look at some of the higher end simulators. Aerofly 8's a little bit more expensive, but it comes with a lot more. It comes with a lot more sceneries. I think 240 different models are in there,
Wow.
54 different flying fields. They actually have some cool things which are called 4D flying scenes, which allow you to adjust conditions. So if you want different wind conditions, you want it to be a different time of day, you can adjust all of those types of things in there. Now this one's going to be a little bit more expensive because it does have significantly more features, and it runs about $125. It's also in the Mac App Store. If you already own Aerofly 7, there's a discount for that as well. But honestly, it's been one of the coolest fixed wing simulators that I've been able to get my hands on.
That's neat.
So, yeah.
Well, and so Mac guys, you're not left out. Like there's something there for you, right? And you don't have to emulate a Windows platform to get something really cool.
It's so unusual for us to not feel left out.
In this instance, it looks like a really cool platform. Quick question for you, Matt. With that platform, is it something that a user can go in and get like photos of wherever they fly and upload those, or is that something that's only provided by the admins?
I don't know the answer to that directly. From what I've been able to tell, I've not seen anywhere where I can add my own in there. I think that's something that they probably have to do.
That's cool. Well, they've got a lot of cool ones, so
they do. And I'm sure their development team is probably open to adding new ones as they move forward.
That's really neat. Cool. Well, Jay, I see you got RealFlight 8 up there. Talk a little bit about RealFlight. What version you're using and how you're using it right now.
Well, yeah. So the most recent version is actually 9. When I grabbed the box here, I didn't realize I'd grabbed the box for 8. But RealFlight's been around a long time, and you're seeing a picture now of the newest version of RealFlight 9, and I installed it on my laptop. Mm-hmm. And the reason I chose to install it on my laptop was so it would be portable, so that I could take it into the office or take it to if I wanted to show someone how to fly, I could take it and show them how to use the simulator. It also allows me to connect it to my 60-inch big screen television via HDMI. So then I can fly on the big screen, which even makes it more realistic. Before I jump into RealFlight, though, I do want to mention that I also have experience with Aerofly, and I've used Aerofly for over 15 years. And it also is a great program. And I remember flying at AMA and Torrey Pines. And, now that I've actually flown at AMA and Torrey Pines, it does a great job of representing those flying sites.
That's really cool.
And honestly, I should have I pointed out earlier than I didn't. I apologize that it also does run on PC as well. It's not Mac. It's not a Mac only application.
Okay, nice.
Right.
So I should try it out.
Yeah.
Yes, 100%.
Well,
yes.
Yeah.
As far as RealFlight, it's been around quite a long time. It's hard to say exactly how long I've been using it, but I started with RealFlight 2, and some years they would have 0.5. Like there might be say 6.5, and then there's 7. So it's probably close to 20 years, I want to say ish. But so RealFlight has some really nice features, and I did a review of RealFlight 9 in the winter 2020 edition of Park Pilot. And so what's really great about that is Park Pilot and Model Aviation are on our website. So Model Aviation is on modelaviation.com/digital, and Park Pilot is on the parkpilot.org/digital. And you can actually go, anyone, you don't have to be an AMA member, anyone can go and download the winter 2020 issue of Park Pilot, and you can read my 4-page review on RealFlight 9. So that's available to you. And,
nice.
Before I dig a little bit more into the features, I do want to throw out really quick. As part of my review, I wrote a sidebar article about, is an RC flight simulator for me? Meaning when people, ask that, is this right for me? Because I understand that the investment of a flight simulator in some cases could be as expensive as your first model airplane, depending on what you choose. And, I always tell people that I think it is a great training tool. And you do have the reset button. So if you make a mistake and you crash, you just hit reset. If you go right to a model and you crash, you may or may not be able to repair it. So I think that's one aspect to look at. And I also
Yeah,
think
for
it's
sure.
important to look at, are you using it as a tool? Do you want to learn how to do new maneuvers or fly better, or are you using it more as a game? Because if you're using it more as a tool, I think it's really going to benefit you at the flying field, because you think about muscle memory. So I used my flight simulator when I wanted to learn how to do a 4-point roll, for example. So I mastered it on the simulator, and then I transitioned out at the flying field, and I was very comfortable with it. Whereas if I started right off the bat at the flying field trying to do a 4-point roll, it probably would have been a little less comfortable. So I would say that, there's nothing wrong if you want to use it like a video game, but just keep in mind that, it's muscle memory. So if you treat it more like a training tool, you're going to get more advantage out of it. So before I dive into RealFlight, I just want to give, Kyle and Matt, give you a chance to give your input on that.
Oh yeah, for sure. Well, and I was listening to Joe Vermillion. I think talk to you, Matt, about how he, did a ton of training on. I think it was RealFlight, because he was laid up with an injury, and then went out to the flying field and just knocked the socks off the guy that was there to teach him, because he'd learned it, because he used it as a training aid, not just as a game.
Yeah, absolutely. And they really do shine as a training tool, in my opinion. But what's interesting is we're finding a lot more simulators that are coming out now, and we'll talk a little bit more about some of these later, that really can be used both ways and can be used interchangeably at any given time. And I've found a lot of enjoyment just kind of sitting around on a simulator, not really trying to necessarily improve my skills, but play different games, because they'll have like little mini games inside the simulators. Aerofly actually has a few like that, where you can do some limbo exercises and things like that. But yeah, I totally agree. I think if you really dedicate yourself to using these as a tool, and because they are very good tools, they really can improve your overall flying ability on the long run.
Yeah, for sure. And when I talk to people that are getting new, just like you, Jay, I do recommend, like, hey, I know there's an investment here, and I know it costs some money, but every time you hit that reset button in your mind, think that was anywhere from a $10 fix to a $200 fix, depending on what you're flying, what you're doing. And if you actually think about it that way, it really adds up to being a really good investment. And pretty much all of the simulators that we're going to talk about today, there's a lot of them out there. But if you use it in the right way and you actually think about it, and I shouldn't say right way either, because I do agree, Matt, like there's a time and a place to just go and have fun and tinker around and enjoy it. Like when I see my kids and they're on the simulator and I'm all excited, like, oh, what are you doing? And they're flying it as if they're in the cockpit and shooting at things. It's like, well, they're playing, and that's okay. They're learning some of the stick movements, right?
It's funny because I kind of equate it to so in RC cars, you have the ability to just go out and just kind of bash around, and you're run it into a tree just to have fun. You can't really do that with model airplanes, because it's a lot more invested there in what could potentially break and whatnot. So that's where the simulator is kind of a nice way to kind of get in there and get some of those, I don't know, weird energies out.
Yeah.
And then you can get in there and really start your training exercises.
Yeah. Jimmy Lewis, I happened to see in the comments, asked, is RealFlight Mac compatible yet? I don't think it is. Am I wrong there? Or?
No, you're correct. It's not Mac compatible. So definitely, if you're on a Mac, you want to look at Aerofly. And I'll also touch on Tim asked a question about if I've flown Horizon Hobby airplanes in real life and how that compares to the simulator. Well, that's a great question, and I actually covered that in my review that I did for Park Pilot, because when I launched RealFlight 9, it actually started me out at Eli Field, which is the field in Illinois where Horizon Hobby tests their airplanes. So if you watch a Horizon Hobby video on their website, that's Eli Field, and it was the Timber that I had reviewed was the airplane that I started with. So I took off and I immediately wanted to roll inverted, and it wouldn't let me. And the reason it wouldn't let me is because SAFE was enabled. And so I thought, wow, that's really cool that there's SAFE and AS3X in the simulator. Because again, as a training tool, especially if you've never flown before, even if you're using the sim, sometimes, that first experience, the plane can be a little bit of a handful. But if you have it on safe, it's going to react in the sim just like it does in the real world, where it has limited pitch and bank and whatnot. So I started flipping switches on the radio so that I could turn off safe, so then I had better control. But a great point to go to your question, Tim, is that on that airplane, the first airplane that I flew that I had done a review on, the Timber, it had an option where you could turn the flaps to be part of the ailerons. So you had full span ailerons. And as I was flipping switches on the transmitter, it gave me that option where I had full span ailerons, and that allowed, much faster roll rate. So yes, I would say that the airplanes do represent closely to the real thing. And real quick, just to hit a couple other highlights about RealFlight, is one thing that's really cool. If anybody's into virtual reality, RealFlight supports VR. It supports Oculus headsets, and it supports HTC Vive headsets. And I personally flown mine with an Oculus. I have an Oculus, and it really represents the experience of being at the flying site, because you can look down and see the ground, you can look up and see the sky, you can look back behind you and see possibly the pit area, depending on, of course, on what flying site you're at. And when you're flying, you really have to follow the airplane like you would in real life. It worked great from the perspective of being on the ground. I did try it from the cockpit, kind of like what you mentioned, Kyle, with your kids, and that was really fun as well, and being able to look out over the wingtips. But once I started doing aerobatics, it kind of got me. Yeah, it really had that effect on me. So that's something to be mindful of. If you put yourself in the cockpit and you do the aerobatics, it might affect you.
Be ready for it.
Absolutely. But so RealFlight 9, real quick. So it has safe and it has AS3X. There's a software-only version that is $100, or you can get the software with the USB transmitter, and I believe that's $179. There's 46 flying sites you can fly. There's 121 airplanes, 10 sailplanes, 36 helicopters, and 19 drones. So you've got a really good cross section. Another thing I really like about RealFlight that you can see in this picture here is I purposely made a hard landing, and it knocked off one half of my landing gear. So as you can see in the picture on the screen, I only have one wheel. And that's another really neat feature of RealFlight, is that you can damage the aircraft but still fly it, depending on the level of damage, and it actually reflects the damage. Like if you actually broke your wing and you only had half your wing, you'd have to fly knife edge to keep flying. And there's a really quick, interesting story. So Jim Bork, who runs Knife Edge, he actually had been practicing that in the sim just for fun. He would purposely break the wing and fly Knife Edge and then bring down and land the airplane. And that actually happened to him in real life, flying an RC model, that his wing snapped and he only had half his wing. And he was able to pilot the airplane and land it successfully without further damage because of practicing that in the simulator.
Yeah, that's really cool. Be able to take something and actually save it based on your sim experience. That's really cool. Once again, it'll save you money in the long run. Trying out different things. Let's see. I'm sure Matt will be back. I think he's suffering a little bit of technical difficulties right now, but I'm sure he's on his way back. I'm looking through some of these comments here. Yeah, physical representation. They're pretty close. I mean, I've flown a lot in RealFlight as well, and I think I would just echo those comments, Jay. That it's very similar. And the cool thing about RealFlight 2 and some of these others is you can adjust those weather conditions. You can say, what, I want some gusty conditions. I'd like to see some random uplift and downlift. And playing with those things really does give you a little bit more experience in those adverse conditions. So when you go to the flying field, you have a little bit of training and practice flying in, X amount of wind. Whereas normally, the only way to learn it would be to go do it and then crash and then fix it and, be afraid to try it next time.
Well, I think we should also mention, Kyle, that we have a flight experience, AMA, a trailer that comes to events and trade shows, and it's stocked with flight simulators again to possibly give the public their first flight experience.
Yeah, and it works out great. People see that big trailer come out with, I think there's 4 or 5 different simulators inside with big screen TVs at different heights, so kids can get involved too. And to see people experience that and realize, that they're having fun with this game, as they're calling it, that they're enjoying flight and having successes. And then when I tell them, that's really very similar to actually having an RC aircraft and going out to a field and flying it, it kind of blows their minds and opens up new opportunities that they didn't even know existed, which is another great way to use these kinds of simulators. I wanted to bring up, I saw a few comments earlier. It looked like the Alaska FPV group, Alaska Drone Racing League. There we go. Speaking of drones, Velocidrone's getting very good. You know what? My first experience with the Velocidrone, I'm going to, full disclosure here, I tried it out a week ago. I downloaded it, checked it out, and myself and my two boys, we were taking turns flying, different events. And it is really good. Now, the one thing I noticed with it, at least on my system here at the house, is it was kind of soaking up a lot of the system. So I had to really drop the, the visual quality to get the feel right. But and that's because I'm running it, as Jay's running his on a laptop. If I had it on a dedicated desktop, I'm sure that there'd be a little bit more computing power there. But I got to say, it's been a lot of fun. And I've also been enjoying a lot of the aspects in terms of online community with that. So you see here, I pulled up the MultiGP. This is from the IO Tiny Whoop course that was set up, I think, in 2018. But there's just so many different options that you can use. And there's so many different aircraft, from Tiny Whoop style stuff. You've got your Beta FPV, your Meteor 65, all that, all the way up to, some of the X-class things. And the price point on that is not that expensive. I think it's around $19.45. It's based in the UK, so it's based on, I think, pounds.
Yeah, they've got it listed as 16 pounds, but it's all paid through PayPal, so they do the conversion automatically for you. It ends up being like right at $20.
Yeah, right around there, depending on the conversion rate, I guess.
Yeah, right.
And they do have some add-ons. So to get to the X class, you have to do an add-on package. And I can't recall. It's been a week. I think they've also got an add-on package for the small stuff, Tiny Whoop kind of stuff.
I believe that's correct. And I, unfortunately, I don't have the price for those add-on packs off the top of my head, but
it's around $5.
Yeah. It's inexpensive, but I second totally what the Alaska guys were saying, because Velocidrone's really come a long way. I had actually used Velocidrone when in its infancy, a year or two, maybe 2 years ago. I've lost track at this point, but it was okay. It wasn't, at that time, wasn't my favorite necessarily, but they've really done a lot of great things with that software, and it feels really good now. Mm-hmm. That's one of the hardest things folks have had to do, is get their drone simulators to feel realistic.
To feel real, yeah.
A lot of times they're a little floaty. They don't really have the weight quite right. Velocidrones, they're there. They've hit it pretty well. And I've actually, I used to use, and I still do, because I kind of float around between these all the time, a software called Rotor Rush for my dedicated Tiny Whoop style.
Which they just had some big news recently. Rotor Rush.
They did, and I want to talk about that a little bit later for sure. But they were working closely with the guys at Tiny Whoop to kind of develop that. And then Velocidrone, they've just released that new pack where they have those micro quads in there. And man, I played with that all weekend last weekend, and I had a ton of fun. And they've actually modeled my personal go-to micro quad, which is the B-Brain brushless, and it feels spot on. It really does. I was super impressed. So kudos to the guys at Velocidrone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it looks like we're getting some comments. Seconding the CPU hog from Dom Perez.
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing. I think people are going to find out all of these are pretty CPU intensive.
Yeah, there's a lot of zeros and ones that go into making these things feel right.
Now, and I'll admit, I'm running a 2015 MacBook Pro, so it's not the latest stuff, but I'm able to run these sims, pretty well. Yeah, am I turning some of the graphics features off? Absolutely, because at the end of the day, I want that flight feeling to be as realistic as possible. And if you've got a lot of CPU being taken up by the graphics part of this,
you don't need shadows.
You don't need the shadows. You don't really need the motion blur. Yeah, or if you can run them, great. They're awesome. Yeah. But at the end of the day, if it's taking away from the performance of the flying, which is the important part, that's why you're in the simulator in the first place. Don't hesitate. Turn that stuff off.
Yeah. I did see a comment earlier. I think it was Scott McNichol. You can run Windows programs on Mac by installing Boot Camp. So if anyone ended up with a copy of RealFlight or really wants to try out RealFlight and they're running a Mac, through Boot Camp and some of those things is how you can make that happen.
Yeah.
There's always a workaround.
There's always a workaround. It's not something I like to do just because I don't have the extra space to have a Windows partition on there, and that becomes a really technical thing to explain to folks too. So if you know how to do that and want to, go for it. Yeah, that'll totally work, and you can absolutely run RealFlight that way.
Yeah, one of the things I want to talk about RealFlight too is the idea of being able to take those photorealistic flying sites. So I can go out to a club field, take pictures. With the same f-stop and those sorts of things, so it looks appropriate all the way around, upload them and add some details, and I can have my flying site on RealFlight as well as an end user. That's a pretty cool feature. So have either of you ever uploaded anything on there yourselves?
I've not, no.
I haven't created a flying site, but I've downloaded flying sites.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I downloaded one from, I think it was Johnny Yaz in District 1 and I were having a conversation. And he was mentioning that I think it was the DJI Mavic 2 has a really good system for using to get those kinds of views. I downloaded his club field and was flying around on that a little bit. It was a lot of fun. So I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that at least. That is, a possibility to do to customize a little bit with RealFlight. Looks like Robert Gow I probably just said your last name wrong, Robert. I'm sorry. But he's done that for several AMA fields. That's pretty cool.
Robert, how you doing? He's a local guy here. I fly tiny whoops with him all the time.
Cool.
Good to see you in the show.
If you've got those available for download, feel free to share. Throw those links out there. Let people try out those AMA fields on RealFlight if you've got them. So. Any other questions we've been missing, guys? I've been trying to keep an eye as I go through and see if anything jumps out. So while you two look at those, I'm going to throw out here. We've also got the DRL sim. I saw somebody mentioning that. As far as price goes, $9.99 for that thing. It's a great value.
It really is. I agree with you. Yeah.
And you mentioned RotorRush as well. They've got a free trial to check it out and kind of kick the tires a little bit, see what you think. Matt, do you happen to know with RotorRush what the end cost is on that if you download?
So it is a subscription based model.
Okay.
So it's I think it ends up being like $4 a month. So it's not crazy.
Mm-hmm.
But I know a lot of people are kind of scared off by a subscription based model, and I can understand that. That's kind of it's certainly an outlier as far as those are concerned, but it is a good simulator. I do enjoy it. I tend to use it mostly for the tiny whoop stuff personally. And what's cool is that they've actually just released. It was just announced yesterday. What's called Tiny Whoop Go, which I haven't messed with it yet. I actually just downloaded it before we started the stream, so I'm probably going to play with it tonight. But it essentially looks like they just took the Tiny Whoops portion of that simulator and extracted it and kind of made it its own thing, and it's a free download, which is really awesome. I need to, unfortunately, I didn't get the URL for that. I'll find that here in just a second and let you guys know, but they're really doing some cool things with this. They're going to have, I think, a lot of competitions. Last year, I was involved in some competitions that they were doing. It was Tiny Whoop Racing through the RotorRush app. It was an esports winter series, I think is what they were calling it. We had an absolute blast every week. We'd show up. It was a different track every week. We'd run it just like a normal drone race.
Mm-hmm.
We'd have heat races, and then finally you get down to the finals, and you got points, and it was a whole 6 or 7 week long series, and the points kept accumulating until we had a champion. And it was a lot of fun, and that's where a lot of these simulators really shine, in my opinion, is the multiplayer aspect to them. And I think most of them, or if not all of them that we've talked about, have some sort of multiplayer function in them.
Yeah. And right now, obviously, with the current climate, like that's so important to have something that you can come together as a community and either do like a fun fly with some challenges, or even just get out and hang out and converse as you fly, just like you would at the regular flying site. You'd be ripping on your buddy, telling him to do a lower pass and all that. And the greatest thing about the flight sims too is when you do that, you just smash that reset button, you're back in it. I know Joe Vermillion, or excuse me, Mean Joe, yes, you might know him, was in a live stream that we were doing, I think 2 weeks ago now, with RealFlight. And he was buzzing through the pop-up tents, with one of his World War I models. And it was just a lot of fun to kind of rib on him a little bit, just have a good time flying.
So I am able to find the where you go to get the simulator for Tiny Whoop Go. You have to sign up for the Tiny Whoop Club Network, which is all free, so there's no cost involved with any of this. But it's tinywhoopclubnetwork.com/membership. Just ask for your name, email address, and then you get emailed the links to download all that stuff. So
cool.
I would certainly encourage folks to go check that out. I think it's going to be a really cool thing. They're going to, I think, have lots of Tiny Whoop parties. Well, while we can't have get-togethers right now, we can do them virtually.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Liftoff, available through Steam. That's one that I still have a lot of fun flying. It's like $19.99. You can get some extra content for, I think, a 5-spot. But as far as, tried and true, having a lot of fun, I've been using that quite a bit, really. And I don't know that it's as realistic maybe as Velocidrone is at this point for my feel, but I still enjoy it. In some ways, I kind of enjoy it more. Now, as far as multiplayer goes, you're limited to 6 people in a room at a time. So if you're having a bunch of friends out to fly, that could become an issue. But as long as you're sticking on, if your squad is 6 or less, you can have a good time there.
I just saw Robert. He's actually given his flight field, Indy RC South Field. He's given the link.
That's awesome. Thank you very
thanks,
much, Robert.
Cool.
Yeah, appreciate it. And I guess, this is a good opportunity too. If you're watching and you've done some of your own stuff like that with RealFlight, feel free to share those links. It's always fun to have new people out at the flying field and out to your club field and welcome them. You can do it virtually too. And after all this is said and done, I would have probably never or very rarely gotten a chance to go out to that District 1 flying club field and gotten to stand there and enjoy the scenery by hopping into RealFlight. In the matter of 5 minutes, I can download it, get it set up and go fly there, which is pretty cool.
There was something else, I think it was the Alaska guys also mentioned. I think it was who that was. Had also mentioned the DCL simulator, which is another drone simulator, FPV drone simulator. What's really kind of neat about this one and really sets it kind of above and beyond everything else is it actually has a console version. So you can play it on Xbox and I think PS4, if I'm not mistaken, which is, I think Liftoff is going to have a console version as well. I don't think it's out yet, but they certainly got out there and put that out, and a lot of people are having fun with it. Now, I haven't messed with it. I can't tell you how realistic it is or anything like that, but I've heard great things. That's all I can say about that.
Well, and one thing to mention too, when it comes to this conversation around console versions versus laptops or that kind of thing, Mac, PC, is the controller. Now,
Absolutely.
Some of these things, you could jump in and you could try and mash the keyboards. I think Liftoff had an option potentially to use your keyboard, but it's really not the way to go about it. You want to have either a dedicated sim controller. I know that there used to be dongles available for RealFlight that you could put in, and plug right in. Use your transmitter for these things.
I think this is probably a good topic to touch on briefly, because now Jay, you're kind of the RealFlight expert here at the table. Now I feel like it used to be that you had to use their proprietary radios for RealFlight, but that's not the case anymore. Is that correct?
Yeah, you can if you have a USB transmitter from RealFlight, you can use that, either an older one or a newer one. But there's other options as well to use different transmitters. And in fact, I think Kyle even had one it's wireless, right? Kyle, didn't you have a wireless one where you could connect your radio?
I did. Let's see. There it is. I don't doubt you can actually see that, but yeah, it was just a dongle that you plug in, and then you could use it that way. So you could just straight up use your. This was for a Spectrum radio. It worked pretty well for quite some time, but eventually I just ended up, plugging in the Interlink Spectrum that it came with on 9 is what I'm using right now at the house. Now I've got a much older one from I think RealFlight 6 transmitter. It's wired as well. And that's what the kids use downstairs on the computer down there. It's still going strong. So these things last. But there's nothing quite like using what you would actually be using at the flying field. As far as a cross training, if you're using it just to have fun, that's one thing. Use whatever works. If you're using it at the field and to try and really get better, you want to understand the touch of your gimbals, where your switches are.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And the great thing is that most simulators now, if not all of them, do support USB transmitters, and most new transmitters now are coming with USB outports on them. I'm using the Jumper T16 Pro, which has a USB coming out of the top, and it works great with all these simulators. I think that a lot of the new Spectrum radios have that as well. At least the higher end ones do.
Yeah, even my old Tyrannus had the port on the back. You could plug it in, no worries.
Having the ability to use that transmitter that you're going to use out on the field. Jay mentioned it earlier. Having that muscle memory kind of baked into what you're doing is so important, especially when you're using this as a training tool, like we mentioned before. It's so important to have that muscle memory baked in, and having the weight of your radio, knowing what the weight of that radio is, so that you know how much you have to hold it up or how much you can let it kind of balance. And it's, to me, that's a really crucial thing as a training tool.
Yeah, thanks Wesley for throwing that out there. The Spectrum has a wireless dongle, shows up as a normal gamepad. That's really cool. So they've thought of it. And speaking of them thinking of it, I've seen a lot more recently people hosting virtual parties, like Horizon Hobby is hosting one. I think, is it tonight, Jay? Is that coming up?
With Juan Pablo, cool. Right?
Yeah, Juan Pablo is going to come out and do some flying. So it's really cool to see organizations stepping up, I would say, and trying to facilitate conversation and fun for some of those people that really can't get to their flying sites. And I guess there's a caveat there. If you can still make it out to your flying site, do it safely, maintain your social distance, go fly. If the weather's decent. I'm looking outside at the rain and snow coming down right now. It's not exactly a great opportunity to get out. But, if you can, go enjoy it. But if you can't, or even if you want to go fly next to Juan Pablo, I think, there's opportunities available.
I want to shout out to Scott Huff, who's in the chat. Thanks for watching, Scott. Can the Jumpers T16 be used for RealFlight 9 sim flying? I believe that it can. Jay, you might know better. It does support just generic USB.
Yeah, it should be. Yeah, it should be able to be used. And yeah, it's great to see Scott.
Yeah, Scott. Let's see. Any other questions we've kind of missed? I'm not sure. I haven't seen too many coming through. There was a hi, Kyle. Hi back. Let's see.
There's a link here for A-Main Hobbies that someone purchased an interface to use their transmitter. Robert.
Okay. Cool. AccuRC is a good heli sim. Wesley Pownell Jr. I've not used it. Have you guys used that one? AccuRC?
No, I'm not familiar with that one.
Okay. Well, apparently that's a good heli sim, according to Wesley. So I trust Wesley. I don't have any reason not to. If you're into helis and want to give that a try, report back. Let us know how that goes.
I do know Aerofly does have helicopters in there. I'm assuming RealFlight obviously does as well. Mm-hmm. So luckily there are some options out there for heli pilots as well. Glad to see that.
Yeah, helis usually scare me in real life. I'll play with them on the Sims sometime.
Terrified.
They're so cool.
And you can fly from water. Look at that picture.
There you go.
Yeah,
there it is. Put some floats on there. And I
Yeah.
mean, these photos, photo fields, excuse me, I'm stumbling over my words, but they look so good. Like it's amazing. And I can only imagine what it's like to throw on some VR headsets and look around, Jay.
Yeah.
When you mentioned you were doing that, that sounded really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. It definitely brings even more realism to the experience.
There
Yeah.
was a question earlier from somebody. Dylan, our producer, might be able to find that comment. Somebody asked about how important those sceneries can be, as a training tool while you're flying in the sim. Um, you know, is it the most important thing? Probably not, but does it certainly, at least for me, makes me a little bit more excited to get in there and know it's like, yeah, look at me, I'm flying at Torrey Pines, or I'm flying at Triple Tree. Like that is kind of a neat feeling, and would probably get you more excited about going into the simulator.
Yeah. Oh man, that's a great shot right there. So, okay, indulge me for just 1 second,
Yeah.
guys. So, this is from Triple Tree here, if I'm understanding correctly. It sure does look
Yep.
like Triple Tree.
Yep, it is.
And it looks like a Pitts S2B. I
Yes.
actually won a flight in a Pitts S2B at Triple Tree. Jamie Pittman was the pilot. It was an amazing experience. I can't say it was better than seeing my kids born, but man, it was one
But
heck of a
it was in the
ride.
conversation, is
Oh,
what you're
it was
saying.
definitely in the conversation. So shout out to Jamie if he's watching. Thank you for that flight. That was amazing. But yeah, it's really cool.
It's amazing how photorealistic they've made some of these sceneries, and these are from Aerofly. The ones in RealFlight are just as good. I mean, it's the developers of these simulators have just done a bang out job.
They sure have. I'm glad there's people out there doing it, because then schmucks like me can enjoy it. Well, hey, this, I think I've had a lot of fun talking to you guys about these simulators. I know that there's some of them we didn't touch on. There's going to be new ones out, in the future, and that's great. The idea of advancing the hobby and trying new things, and if you see, you as a developer see something you think I could do that better, people are doing that, and it's really cool to see that advancing. But for now, I think unless somebody has a crazy question for us, or something new, I think we've beat this one to death.
I just want to take a second to thank everybody for watching, taking some time out of your day. We're trying to put out a lot of content for you guys while we're all isolated at home, and we appreciate you guys taking some time out and hanging out with us for a little bit while we talk a little shop.
No, certainly, it's a lot of
absolutely.
fun. And if you're watching and you've watched throughout this thing, once again, to echo that, thank you so much. If you've got an idea on where we should all go to go fly this evening, feel free to throw that into the comments too. Maybe we'll jump in and say hello on some of your sites that you're hosting. So it'll be fun. I've got RealFlight, Velocidrone, I've got Liftoff, all that kind of stuff. So it should be fun.
Absolutely.
By the way, if you're not an AMA member, definitely think about signing up. Modelaircraft.org/join. This is just a small, tiny portion of all the fun stuff that we're knocking out, and not only virtually in the now, but if this has piqued your interest, if you think this could be something that you would want to try out and enjoy, we have a plethora of resources available to you. Model Aircraft. There's free PDFs on our AMA quick projects. Check that out. That's on amaflightschool.org/quick projects. So if you've got some kids at home, try some of that out. Enjoy.
Free downloadable issues of Model Aviation magazine right now too.
Awesome.
And Park Pilot.
And Park Pilot, yes, of course.
Yeah.
To include the RealFlight review, that's the winter 2020 Park Pilot.
Definitely, guys. There's so much out there to take part in, to enjoy. There's absolutely no reason you should be bored on your couch at home. We're giving you plenty of material. But in the meantime, as you guys think of opportunities for us to serve you, whether it be the member or a future member, let us know. We're here for you. We're here alongside you throughout this whole process, and we're happy to be there. But with that, I think I will sign off, let you all go. And once again, thank you so much for joining us.
Let's go fly virtually.
Oh, by the way, you can watch this after the feed ends. It'll take a little bit of time to buffer, but feel free to share this if you've enjoyed the conversation. If you've got any further questions, feel free to post those, and we will jump in later and respond. So thanks again, guys. Appreciate you.